Hi, I'm Jared Fuller. Welcome to Scratching the Surface. I bet this is the case for many of the other graphic designers who listen to this show, but for me, the first piece of graphic design that made me aware of design was the album cover. It was inside my favorite CDs when I was growing up that I first saw that credit designer and realized that this was something that I could do too. And my favorite album covers were the ones that had a point of view, that were enigmatic, that were artistic, that were more than just a portrait of the band. They could stand as a work of art on their own. Peter Savile's classic Joy Division cover and much of the work he did with Factory Records immediately comes to mind as embodying this spirit. This work comes from an integration of music and design, but also from a curatorial sensibility from the record label, when they too have a clear sense of who they are and what they represent and what it means to bring a group of artists and designers together. For me, the label that is the best at this today is Ghostly International. I started listening to artists from Ghostly, usually electronic artists like Tycho or Matthew Deere or Comtrues, when I was in college, and immediately I related to their sensibility. These artists felt related, but also unique and individual, yet still they all felt like they fit together. There was and is this really interesting balance between the artist's voice and the record label's voice. The album cover, the design, sits somewhere in the middle of that intersection. Ghostly was founded in 1999 by Sam Valenti, and to celebrate the label's 25th anniversary, they've published a new coffee table book called We'll Never Stop Living This Way, a Ghostly International catalog that celebrates the label's marriage of sound and image, of music and design. The book was edited by Sam along with J.C. Gable and another former guest of this show, James Goggin. Reading the book, I was struck by how central design has been to Ghostly's story right from the beginning. So I thought it might be interesting to have Sam on the show to talk about how he thinks about design and its relationship to music. Sam Valenti founded Ghostly from his dorm room at the University of Michigan in 1999 and has grown it from a little DIY affair into one of the foremost independent labels featuring experimental electronic music of all types. But more than that, I think he's also created a cultural brand that has produced newly iconic album covers, original products, sold artwork, and more. For me, Ghostly is not just a label, but this cultural brand sharing a set of ideas about art, culture, design, and music. In this conversation, Sam and I talk about how he thinks about design, the role of visual art in Ghostly's history, and how he works with designers. But we also talk about larger questions about how culture is created, the role of brands in spreading ideas, and the place for record labels today. We close out this conversation by talking about his popular newsletter, Herb Sundays, where he asks artists he admires to put together a playlist of favorite tracks. This, too, I think, is a type of culture building that Sam has been doing his entire career. If you like this show and what we do here, you can support our work by joining our Substack. We have a monthly newsletter that is free for all, as well as a paid tier that gets you a bonus interview each month and helps keep this show free for everyone. I hope this show is like listening to a great conversation in a coffee shop. So for the price of a cup of coffee a month, you too can help us do this work and put more of it into the world. Sam Valenti, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you so much, Jarrett, for having me.
What's the relationship for you between music and design? How do you think about how those fit together?
Someone said to me, I don't know if it was like from a movie or from an actual like design quote, but someone once said, you can't hear what you can't see. That's just stuck with me. And so someone can source that or a version of that. But that's kind of how I feel about design and music. And I also really, I think as someone who is not a graphic designer but loves it and loves working with designers, the record sleeve was and is still like, to me, the like atomic element. Maybe
Hmm.
the first thing I recognized, I understood as graphic design, maybe that and movie posters, and
Yeah.
then also and still like sort of a covenant between the two. A lot of the history of Ghostly like maps over the change in music culture from physical to digital, maybe back to physical, wherever we are. And so there was like this anxiety about losing the record sleeve,
Right.
both size and tactility. And so I think, especially, what I think of like our label is that it is very much like connected to graphic design, and to me, like it's the best, some of the most important graphic work in history is for music. So
Yeah.
the short answer, I'm very fond of the conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the reason I wanted to start there is because you just released this new book, We'll Never Stop Living This Way, a ghostly international catalog, that celebrates the first 25 years of your label, Ghostly International. And there's a lot in there that I want to talk about, but I was struck in reading the book how central design was to that book, but also how central designers were in that book. You talk to a lot of the designers in that book that have designed sleeves over the years, and it struck me how often you return to the same designers, and there's almost this relationship. Sort of like the label band relationship where you're like signing these designers. They are a part of your roster on the Ghostly
Sure.
website. You list your visual artists and designers that you work with right there on the same page as the artists. How do you think about your relationship with designers as it relates to the relationship with the musicians and the artists and the bands that you work with in the formation of like what became the Ghostly brand, if that makes sense? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's this interesting kind of equality that emerges in the book between design and music.
Yeah. I think it was always intended to be a marriage. It wasn't like something that snuck up on us. I think the history of the sort of like core influences musically, it's partially like the sort of obviously electronic music of
Mhm.
Detroit and Chicago, and kind of a love of, the de facto sleeves were often like house jackets or
Yeah.
even blank jackets with
Yeah.
a common label sticker label in the middle. um and like I love that sort of durability and recognizability.
Yeah.
So if you're flipping through bins, you're just like, oh, tracks,
Mhm.
oh, transmat, whatever. It's like thinking is in terms of like brands.
Mhm.
The word brand never like scared me. I like the idea of like, you know, brand is actually very central to like Detroit culture. I think about the auto industry.
Yeah.
It's like thought of as like this like fussy term, but it's like, to me, it's like a pride, source of pride when you like see a logo and it is elegantly placed and like represents provenance, right? So like that was important to me. And then the other like graphic influence probably is like the canonical UK labels like Factory,
Mhm.
who obviously, Joy Division and
Mhm.
other designer, a few other designers, but obviously, I mean, Peter Saville as like sort of as a partner of the label. Like, speaking of design in communion with music, he was a founding partner,
Yeah.
but also like being kind of like the fifth Beatle of the bands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
and 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 same with like, the Von Oliver,
Oh yeah. Yeah.
V23, his team, at 4AD. Similarly, like I always, to me, it was part and parcel of those identities. So I kind of lusted after something similar, but I also kind of knew we would never be able to like encapsulate all the genres into one visual language. So like getting to work with different designers and photographers, etc., felt like a way around it, but still having a sort of like a house style without having a singular aesthetic, for what it's worth.
Yeah, I love that you brought those up because I wanted to talk about the influence of factory, especially in Peter Savil's work, seems very related to the way that you think about design. I hadn't even thought about 4AD until you said that. The other label that I would add that I always think of as a kind of conceptual forebearer to Ghostly is ECM, and
Sure.
the way they have these sort of abstract photos or paintings with like very simple typography across all their albums, which seems very related to what you're doing. I talked to Mike Chena on when he was on the show about this a little bit, and I'm curious how you think about that. I don't know. I don't know the word. I want to say balance, but that doesn't quite feel right to me. That interplay between artist and music and house style. You've been genre agnostic. How do you create a coherent brand there where there is a, oh, this is a Ghostly album cover, while also acknowledging the diversity of artists and music that you work with?
Yeah, ECM seems like the most successful long running
Yeah.
sort of marriage of,
Right.
and it works. Like even though there's obviously a simplicity and a minimalism and an elegance that channels the whole history of the label. Mike got me into ECM and showed me Sleeves of Desire,
Hmm.
the book for the first time, and
Yeah.
got kind of put my brain. And which I think subconsciously I always was like, how can we make what's going to be our Sleeves of Desire one day? And I guess the book that
This is
James
it. You did
Goggin,
it. Yeah.
yeah, James was like, it was great to have somebody who knew the label but was not like an insider, in like we hadn't worked with him before, so I think he was
Mm.
able to look at it. It's cool. It's like a travel log. It's
Hmm.
obviously like a catalog raisonné, and it's also like a little time, like a automated ride through the label, like historically, like the artists appear in interview form at the moment they enter the
Right.
label orbit. So he's such a brilliant designer. It was like, and so tenacious for such a long time, and getting this done. So it's like another person, a
Yeah.
brilliant, another brilliant collaborator that I got to meet. And that's the selfish fun of it, is just getting to I tend to like designers, the personality types, and part of like the sort of secret fun of the label has been developing friendships,
Yeah.
and whether they're working relationships or just mutual admiration with designers. I'm appreciative of the work, and I know how hard it is. I kind of see it as like under heralded. I think my new beat is that like everyone's so fixated on fine art as this as sort of like the holiest of the arts, and design is obviously, in service of or what have you. But in some ways, I feel like it's been more impactful
Mm.
than the fine arts have been in the last maybe 40 years, in the evolution of culture. So like I may be tipping into like design zealot territory in my old age.
Well, you
Yeah.
found the podcast to be a design zealot. I think if there
Perfect.
if there is one, it's are you? I have like a really sort of lame process question. Hearing you talk about these collaborations, do you see yourself as a, almost matchmaker in when you get an album, you're working with an artist, you're hearing this music, are you thinking about like, who's the designer that is right for this? Or do you have, designers that come in and you're like, oh, you're right for this band? How do you start to think about pairing visuals with music?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's kind of like the ghostly process.
Mm.
There is no de facto team. I've done a lot of the matchmaking, especially like in the first 15 years where I was the chooser or what have you. But
Right.
I give a lot of the credit, to my colleague Molly Smith, who is here in New York, is who's art director for the label, and she is, uh, you know, an art school graduate and a designer in her own right. But a lot of her skill and what makes Ghostly Ghostly is that she's able to listen to the artist, what their vision is, share a couple ideas for certain designers that we know, or take their inputs on who to talk to. Find a photographer for the press photos, maybe suggest a
Mm.
video person, but like kind of put it through the filter or through the funnel of like, um, how do you get an artist to share what they actually want? And maybe a lot of musicians don't have a graphic background, so it's not just like which pictures do you like, it's like who do you
Right.
connect with? And I think that is like central to the ghostly process. It's a little like it'd be easier just to have an in-house person and they bang it out and grind through it, but I really like that like romantic connection that happens between designer and artist when
Yeah.
Molly is able to match make them organically.
And I guess that kind of goes back to my earlier question too about that balance or interplay between label identity and artist identity. By matchmaking, there is some level of brand identity there or label identity, but because it's not the same person, because it isn't the fixed process, that still allows each artist uh, their brand identity to come through at the same time, right?
Absolutely. And some of the musicians we worked with are graphic designers like
Right.
Tycho, Scott Hansen,
Mm-hmm.
et cetera. And so like that's, but we're still like giving notes or suggesting partnerships or yeah, we don't have a house style is what I say. And I think is true. I think it's like the how and the trying to find great collaborators, which end up becoming long-term collaborators, especially like Michael China, who's, done over probably 300 plus,
Right.
covers,
Right.
not including other things. But that, yeah, that's the joy of, is having that long-term relationship and being like, hey, remember on that project you chose
Mm-hmm.
so and so, or like it's like a learning experience. And Michael's style, or his ability to do so many styles and his range allows it to not feel staid or boring to
Right. And I
me.
and I
Yeah,
think that's right. Like it's not that there is a house style, but there is a house ethos or a house
there's a
like ideology.
sensibility.
Yeah, sensibility is a great word.
Yeah, yeah, there's a sensibility that, and the book is fun to look at because I hope that it shows there's like a consistency of like approach or like there's like themes that we come back to.
Right.
And there's a lot of references, and there's especially early days, like back to Saville. It's like a lot of the early days is us trying to look like someone else,
Hmm.
trying our hand at Saville. My first collaborators, one of them, Will Calcutt, who
Yep.
has shot, is a photographer and a designer, but like it's us in school, both being art history students, looking at pictures of, oh, let's try this. Let's try it's like any musician or designers tries to look like their heroes.
Yep.
You can see us try to be
Yeah.
Saville or fill in or Bridget Riley paintings become techno sleeves, but that's also like the fun of it is learning in public,
Yeah.
and design is a great way to do that.
And you mentioned earlier that you didn't sort of back your way into this, that ethos was there from the beginning. And back when you were in college in late 90s, early 2000s, and you were starting Ghostly, you wrote down a sort of mission statement that Ghostly was going to be records, clothes, and a magazine. Talk to me about that early ambition that records, clothes, magazine, all of those are very, very visual, very graphic. Music's just one of those triads. What were you thinking about at that time? What were you interested in? And how did this idea of music, clothing, and publishing connect for you as a, 19, 20 year old?
Yeah, it seems. I feel like we've done some of it. I mean, the records is the one we've done the most of. We never did a magazine. Uh, maybe one day. But I think those were the dominant modes of. I think I like the idea of record labels as like little curator or like aesthetic
Mm-hmm.
villages, whatever metaphor you want to throw at a gallery or salon of people doing stuff together. And so I think at the time, obviously, there was also labels that had strong visual identities. There's a label called Liquid Sky
Oh, yeah.
out of New York that was like more drum and bass and trip hop. They had a store I got to visit, coming to New York with my parents as a kid and just like I didn't see the merch as marketing. I saw the products as like identity creation. It's like, oh wow,
Right.
I'm wearing a Liquid Sky shirt back in the Midwest at a rave, and somebody recognizes it, and that's like your instant like friendship or conversation. And so I always like the idea of like these little communication nodes, that the Ghost logo could be a sort of signpost for people. And then magazines were also just like a very dominant force at the time. The strength of like, we would go to Borders Books,
Yeah. Yeah.
which was
Yeah.
a Michigan chain originally.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, and like they would import, copious, like, not only like the Face and ID and Dazed. There was one called Sleaze Nation we were obsessed with. But there was also like all the DJ mags, Jockey
Mm,
Slut, DJ,
hmm.
and like, so you had it was almost like fetishistic. Europe and the UK especially were so, and Tokyo for Japan too, but like we were so obsessed with like anything that was, it felt so foreign and so exotic. And so magazines really loomed large in our cultural hierarchy at the time. And so I think at the time I thought how cool it would be to like do that as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you haven't done a magazine proper, I guess, but I still feel like you have done experiments in publishing. I think the Ghostly blog, even, is
Right.
not just press releases. I think that like Ghostly After Dark Twitter feed, like all of that is sort of playing
That's
with these
true.
ideas of publishing.
That's true. Yeah. It's like, how do you make the medium yours? Or
Yeah.
it's like, how can we, what's the ghostly approach to Twitter or fill in the
Right.
blank? Is kind of the same instinct, I guess.
I think that's right. When I was reading the book and looking through the book, I kept thinking about this idea that I got from the fashion designer and creative director Jonathan Anderson. He's
Mm-hmm.
now at Dior, and
Yep.
every profile of him, he always talks about this idea that luxury brands, he prefers the term cultural brands, in that what he hopes he's selling is not luxury, but a set of ideas, a set of cultures. And so he's drawing from film and music and craft and pottery and putting that into the clothes to kind of highlight culture. And as I was
Yeah.
looking at the book, I was feeling like that term cultural brand is actually a really good representation of what you are trying to do. Does that resonate with you at all?
Absolutely. Yeah. I probably should adopt that. I mean, it's like a weird thing because record label has such there's also a lot of like connotations, and the music industry is not like, it's not, we didn't choose the music industry because we love the music industry. Music, and my like the record label was a forum that allowed us to be part of music, but like it's not like we wanted to be Sony or fill
Hmm.
in the blank. It's like unfortunate in some ways. Like, I always feel like that we're limited in some ways by the imagination of what came before. But yes, cultural brand, exactly. Those are the companies I respond to, whether they're fashion or art or this intentionality, and like vision, like Apple, of
Yeah.
your,
Yeah.
all these company Supreme, whatever era you want to put them in. Like, it's just like places that surprise and kind of astound you consistently, is like the what we'd want it to be.
This reminds me of something you write early in the book. You write, as a teen in the mid to late 90s, the world of music engulfed me. I wrote school papers with titles like Hip Hop is Life. I sought out clothes I saw in the Source magazine and recorded the 12 to 2 a.m. MTV Raps show every Friday night on my VCR. I became obsessed with figuring out how to DJ. I made shoddy beats with samples from my dad's record collection. This was everything to me. And I feel like this is getting to what you're talking about, in that the music is an entry point into all of these other things, into aesthetics, into ideas, into magazines and publish it. Like all of these are ways into culture. And you just did an interview with Essence about the book, and you had this great line: the way people find their way into culture is still through subculture. Talk to me about this idea of subculture. Talk to me about this idea of music, of art, of fashion as being ways into a subculture or a lifestyle or, a context that, someone can identify with. How do you still see that functioning today?
Yeah, I still, to be clear, I still like hold music up as the like if the music wasn't good, it would
Right,
nothing needs
right,
anything. So it's like
right.
it's not like that all of this was a means to an end. It's just that when you can put, to your point, music is so holy. If you can put beautiful art around it, or a great show, or a great, and I think like we were talking last night about how there's I think we're talking about the Charlie XCX Brat
Mm,
campaign, and like how that was like a graphic campaign, right? It's like it was story, it was mood, the music resonated with people, but like you can, when music's good, you can do you can communicate so much, and then especially if you have a fashion that suits it, and you have like DJ culture is all about like context creation. So hip. I was lucky to grow up in like that hip hop boom bap '90s era, because it had been commercialized clearly, but it was still kind of like, I think there was a lot of money thrown at it by bigger labels, because it was like, well, maybe we'll have a Dr. Dre. We don't really know. Like it was like this kind of confluence of like capital and extreme taste. And so you had a Stretch and Bobbito radio show, and all the international stations that wanted to be like them, which were good. But you had an underground feeder system. You had obviously you had MTV context, but you also had artists that are self-styled and had a lot of character, and they're also like transfiguring the stuff. I would go to the mall and want to buy Polo or Tommy Hilfiger or whatever, and because I saw rappers wear it, and it was like it was just kind of mall clothing until they wore
Right,
it, and
right.
they made it like fresh, and DJs too. It's like, oh wow, I didn't know that sample came from that, or I didn't know, was trying to source like DJ Premier samples. Like the participatory aspect of especially hip hop and electronic music of the time was very inviting, and I felt in a sort of pre or early internet context, it was like, oh, I can DJ and I'm valid. I'm not like important, but I'm like I'm contributing.
Yeah.
I have like accrued knowledge. I can meet people. I can talk to people about stuff. There's samples to source. There's clothes to find. And so like coming to New York was like,
Yeah.
holy smokes, like
Yeah.
mixtapes, and just, I don't know. I think there was just so much surface area around the time, including especially IRL stuff, which I think
Yeah.
is, we're all kind of realizing is more important again than anything. It's like the actual thing that people want is, and
Right.
I feel lucky that I got to experience those cultures. I mean, still as an outsider, I still feel like an outsider, but there was a lot to chew on. And I, with Ghostly, it was like, how can we create that surface area or that friction through
Yes.
events or merch or collabs or funny marketing, or like it's all additive to the feeling you get from a great song.
That's it. Yes, that's exactly where I wanted to. I love the way you kind of took that answer, because I mean, when I read that quote that I read back to you, I remembered also being a teenager, and it wasn't it. Yes, it was about the music first, but then that music was what led me into certain designers, and then that's why I dressed a certain way, and
Right.
all of that stuff connected and created a culture for me that was not there before. And I don't want this to sound nostalgic. I don't want this to sound like, oh, it was better then. But I'm wondering how you think about the responsibility of a label in making space for that when so much consumption is happening algorithmically, when you're finding things are just kind of being forced to you, you're streaming them, there's like kind of just ambient content happening. Is part of your job, part of your responsibility, part of what Ghostly is trying to do is to create those cultures, to create those spaces for those kind of connections to be had?
I think so. Yeah. I think if the great brands do that, whether they're labels or Patagonia or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
It's like put me in a place or show me, and Supreme, to their credit, has always been good about including great reference, Lee Bowery or Ramel Z, and like, yes, 90% of the kids are just like, sweet, I'm gonna flip this, or doesn't matter, but like, you're always trying to talk to like the 10% of people. So to your point, like, it's not
Yeah.
a bad thing. It's just like, it's for curious people are going to want to go further, and you're always trying to give like a little bit of extra or story for those people. And I think I'm that way with stuff I'm into.
Hmm.
I'm the 90% for a lot of industries where it's lost on me, where I'm like, I want to be a foodie, but I just know I don't have the palette that my friends like Michael have, where they really like are thinking about ingredients and
Mm.
love
Hmm.
and sourcing it. It's like, I'm happy to be 90% of that, as long as I like have friends that are
Right,
10%. And like,
right.
so I like pick my lanes. But yeah, I think it is our job, right? It's like, not necessarily as like a school of the youth way, but I think it's just, all of this comes from something. None of
R-
this just randomly happened, and
right.
we're all kind of downstream from everything. Like, we didn't invent anything, right? So it's fun too. It's like, oh, if you like this, you might like this. Like what record store clerks did for me growing up, or how do you create knowledge? And so, yes, algorithmic stuff is like norms, and that's, again, 90%. But like, we have our own team playlist where all the team picks songs for a monthly streaming playlist, and
Mm.
there's tons of great stuff in there. So if someone does want to follow Ghostly down the rabbit hole, there is like, it's not just more Ghostly. It's like, it's probably only like 10% Ghostly related music in those playlists. It's all the shit we're listening to.
Right,
And
right.
like, so I think like just little subtle things like that are obvious, but it's a way to show deference to that we're part of a bigger world, that we're not self-obsessed. Uh,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
we're consumers too, we're fans too. And I
Y-
think that's the difference, right?
Yeah, and I want to come back to this idea of fans in a second, but I just want to thread this needle a little bit more about brands and culture, because I'm really, I feel like you are straddling these lines in really interesting ways, and I think this idea of how is culture created and how do brands connect to culture, or how do brands create culture, is really interesting. Again, to go back to something you write in the book, and you're talking about the products that Ghostly has made. You've made ballpoint pens and sculptures and art pieces that are purchasable as they relate to various artists or music. And you say, it seems that young people, including myself, have all picked up the concept that brands are a way of communicating ideas, both in the creation and consumption of them. It's the language we speak. Ghostly was very much about the idea of playing with the language and finesse of corporations. Tell me about this idea of kind of Ghostly as a brand that is creating culture, but also Ghostly as a brand that's kind of responding to and entering into culture, and how brand, like that term brand, relates really specifically to how you think about what you do.
Yeah, I think there's a self-awareness. Like, I both love and loathe consumer culture, right? And I'm very hopefully I'm judgmental of my own instincts, and I don't fully trust them as like, it is commerce. So you can gussy it up, but when you're selling stuff, you're in the business of making and selling things. And so I think it's like, you have to like be honest that this isn't um totally DIY. There's like people who have jobs, and
Mm,
artists need to make money, and like, there were more shambolic years where we were more touch and go, or less, or more loosey goosey about norms. But it's like, I to me, it's like, we have a lot of responsibility to make sure that the artists who give us work to promote are at least given the best fair shake in that marketplace, which is not a pleasant or egalitarian world. And so like, we're at to be equalizers to some degree, and like uphold the
yeah.
standards, protect their copyright, or against, infringement, or engage them in, sampling other people, et cetera. It's like, these aren't like little things. And so it's like, I think there's a self-awareness to go see where it's both loving and loathing the modern era. Um,
Right.
like Ghost After
Right.
Dark was like a riff on all the brands trying to sound like people,
Yeah.
and riffing on like, um, yeah, it's supposed to be pointed, right? And making fun of DJ culture and making fun of, it's both celebrating it and ridiculing it, which to me has always been a good place to sit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. It's my understanding that when you applied to the University of Michigan in your application letter, you wrote that you wanted to start a record label. Is that right? Is that true?
Yeah, I actually forgot that until a couple years ago. My dad surfaced said letter, and I knew I had like the name and the logo and the concept. I had no musicians to work with, or
Yeah.
so it was like a little bit like a field of dreams. And I got lucky that I met, the people I did, because I definitely was not going to do it alone and didn't have the abilities to do it. But I knew the form. I think especially from Detroit record
Yeah.
stores, it was like half local product at some of these shops, and you would see people come in with boxes and like drop them off as consignment, and hear them on the radio on the mix shows, or it seemed like very like homespun, like almost probably I didn't have like a hardcore,
Yeah.
like I didn't have like a emo hardcore background, but I'm sure similarly the same impulse of like,
Mm-hmm.
I can make my own record, I can distribute it, I can market it, is kind of the same for electronic music for me. It's like
Got
I
it.
didn't I
Yeah.
didn't call it I didn't call it DIY, but I think it was DIY.
I mean, the reason I asked that because that's as the book says, that was 25 years ago, 19 late 90s, early 2000s. I'm curious what your impression of what it meant to start a record label was when you were 18, and how that tracks to the work that you're doing now, and the purpose or the role of a record label then and the record in a record label now. What has changed and what has stayed the same over the course of these 25 years?
Yeah, it's people ask that. I'm obviously like, again, ghosting maps to the history of like piracy,
Mm-hmm.
streaming, socials. Like, we rode and fell with all the same market forces, but also kind of like learned to be a little bit, it's like being loose. Like
Mm-hmm.
like every technological change, we learned like, okay, and I never was like, okay, this is panacea, we're set. It's like, all right, how do we navigate this moment? Or like when CDs started to slip, vinyl was already like kaput basically, besides
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
just like these little blips. And obviously there's always something new, and it's still tenuous. It's like never been scarier, to be a musician in some ways, but there's always like new innovations and ideas. So I think it was both a naive, I thought, it was like, again, like a record label just meant pressing a couple 12 inches and doing, shipping them
Mm-hmm.
around and getting, it wasn't a real business. I think
Right.
at the
Right.
time, but I think it was also, I knew the form was interesting, and I knew and there were examples out there like Moax,
Mm-hmm.
and these sort of, to use your word, cultural brands that were like, it was just so exciting to see what you could do and how you could communicate, again, especially pre-socials, or even pre like fast internet. It was like these images of Lavelle and Shadow and DJ Crush and
Yes.
Giles Peterson, like, and Futura sleeves, really like, it was like, oh, this is a thing, this is a the assemblage. I think that's what, I think streetwear became that,
Mm-hmm.
like the sort of
Mm-hmm.
ultimate version of that. And then now there'll be, there's probably another, form taking shape as we speak, where like the economics make sense. But it's like, yeah, world building, to use the like a term I didn't have then, but
Right. Yeah. Right.
that it's like, oh, you can put all this shit together and it somehow makes sense, and you created something, even if you just are like making a t-shirt or a record. It was
I,
valid.
I think that's exactly right. And that's exactly why I was asking you that question, because I think it's interesting that you were embarking on this really at the height of Napster and piracy and file sharing and MP3 culture. I'm a little younger than you. I kind of I saw the I saw that, but I definitely feel like my kind of musical enlightenment came in the iTunes
Yeah.
era, but that was also the same time as blogging, which to me
Yep.
was a similar thing where there was this idea that gatekeepers, that all of this stuff was going away and that everyone was going to be able to publish everything all the time and you would have access to everything all the time. And you've already talked about we've gone through these sort of different phases, and Ghostly has gone through these different phases. And it's interesting to me that in some ways, is that what a record label actually needs to be again? Not a gatekeeper as in preventing some people, all of this stuff, but as a signifier of quality, as a curator of a set of ideas, as a platform for these experiences, especially like in real life experiences like you talked about earlier. Is some of that kind of old mentality coming back in some way, or is there some sort of like new importance on curation that there wasn't before?
It's a good question. A friend of mine who's like a well-known podcaster was like, he's a musician as well, and he's trying to figure out what to do with the record, like self-release it or
Mm.
and I think and he was like, yeah, I want to be on like a label that has a community of artists. And
Yeah,
he
yeah,
kind of he almost had like a Laurel Canyon vision of like what a
yeah.
record label was, and like
Yeah.
which is what we all kind of have, is like this, like we desperately crave to be part of like the community and jam together and stuff. And it's like I kind of disavowed him of that notion. It's like, yes, there are labels that have smaller communities. They're probably we probably don't know them, or they don't have the distribution reach that you want. I mean, that's labels start as like bedroom communities and like groups of friends,
Hmm.
and it's like you want to be on a professional label that can do the things you want to do, but you're not going to be sitting on the couch with like the other artists probably. Like you might know them, but like it's sort of, so it's like what it actually is a record label. I think it's like a set of standards, not just commercially or like
Right.
curatorially, but like ethics. Um, and like it's a lot of admin and a lot of like, it's more than ever. That's the thing that's changed the most, to be honest, is just the sheer amount of the effortfulness it takes just to put something into the world in a decent manner. To me, it's like the core values of like discovering something great, whether it's new or old, reissues are awesome too, and putting it back into the world without stepping on the story or the vision, and building a context around it is the same as when we started. So I think there's room for different times. You need, and even room for major labels too, right? It's like I we're all playing our part in this bigger game, and like there's a melancholy around music now. I think a lot of us uh, of a certain age grew up with a pretty like sizable monoculture, even around indie,
Yeah.
right? It's like I was
Yeah.
able to watch Gangstar on TV, right? It's like
Yeah.
I wasn't discovering it like at the root level. I was already being marketed to. I think we have there's a little bit of a fixation, especially for Gen X adjacent people like myself, that we think we were these pioneers, but we were pretty well marketed to. These were
Right. Yeah.
major, these are major label stuff. I mean, some of us were, actually went further down the rabbit hole and actually were at like base level. I probably did that a couple of times and things, but I was still downstream from, we're, and I think it's harder to find, hey, there's just more interesting shit out there.
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
if I'm a kid, I probably want to play games, right? I want to
Hmm.
participate. Games and gambling are like participatory, and probably the future of pornography and AI. And it's like the self has been fully engulfed, and myself included, with socials. And
Yeah.
I think it's just a different world. But however, there is like always room for communion. There's always room for finding your people in real life. Music is still like one of the best ways to do that. And
Exactly.
so like it's like you can't be too precious about it, and you have to lean into the people who are finding ways to do that. There are great, short form video creators who are kind of the new music journalists for
Mm-hmm.
kids, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
it offends people because they want it to be like Lester Bangs again, and there will be, there always going to be some version of that, but it's the job is not to worry about that. The job is like, is there good music that is being made available and like share with people? That's the like. So I think the value of the label is probably less than it was before because there's so much other context creation.
Right.
But I think it's still like a covenant or communion that you have to have as a label, or else you have nothing, right? Or else we're just a like distributor, and I don't. That's not
Right.
derogatory to distributors, but it's like if there's no brand or there's no curation, then it's just distribution with no. Even the distributors I know are like labels. They have to curate. They have to
Right.
finesse. Like it's very hard. It's a very hard job that people don't realize that. Like any job, it's harder than it looks.
Yeah, and I think that like branding and curation is the thing that I was getting at and that I was interested in because I do, and not to go back to this idea of like algorithms and just content being forced to us, but I teach undergraduate design students, and I'm noticing a increasing resistance to just stuff being fed to them. There, it is swinging back to this idea of like, I want somebody to actually tell me what they like and what is good because I trust that more than just a playlist that was generated for me. And I think this speaks to what we were talking about. I also think this speaks to your Substack newsletter, Herb Sundays, which is kind of doing that also. Can you quickly give the framework for what Herb Sundays is and what your kind of goal for that project is and how that does or doesn't relate to Ghostly?
Yeah, Herb's kind of multifaceted. One, it's like excuse to bother Mike Chena every week to make more stuff. So that's the main one, and torture him. And he's done every cover so far, um, which is a blast. And Mike and I won't speak for Mike. We have a lot of fun, and it's an experience and like an experiment in design as well. And I, you know, love Mike's side of the table, but it's really incredible how he's able to imbue these with character and
Mm-hmm.
have it again. There's no house style, but the fact that it's been all Mike is fun because you see his range.
Right.
We just did a talk at SVA together, and like I had never seen those images big before,
Mm,
and it was just so striking how good
yeah.
Mike's stuff is and how different it is. It looks like it's different artists. So yeah, that the design aspect is like a excuse part of it. I think it is like giving flowers to friends and artists I've admired, um, or people that inspire me. It's a chance to talk about them in an era of like takes
Mm-hmm.
and like
Yeah.
shitting on stuff. It's like I do kind of, and not like in a promotional way. I don't have any incentive other than wanting to talk about these people, but photographers, um, Marilyn Minter did one,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
Ian Anderson from Designers Republic did
Oh
one, and
yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
I get to be a student again of these people
Yeah.
for a week, and that's actually like it's almost like I don't have a curriculum or a work practice, so it's a nice way to like be a fan again and really dive into some of their stuff or their podcasts, which yours have been referenced before for sure.
Oh, that's
Um,
that's nice to hear.
yeah, it's like there's so much good material in the world. Not so much, but there's stuff. There's some like yours that you're like I go back to often, and I'm renewed. And then obviously it's like music discovery. Um, it's I wouldn't say it's anti-algo. It sounds a little dramatic, but it's
Yeah.
definitely like the character of people comes through and what music they love in a way that's still pretty magical,
Yeah.
even in
Yeah.
it's even without the cassette or the burned
Mm-hmm.
CD intentionality, it's still like magic when you hear someone's taste. And so I love that people can discover their own songs through this too, and kind of paying it forward.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
that sort of like leads in really nicely to my last question, actually, because what strikes me about the newsletter is, yes, you're talking to these people that you admire. You are a fan of them. You're getting a playlist of songs that they are a fan of. And then you write these really kind of beautiful essays where you're like articulating their project, articulating who they are and how they fit into some larger culture. And in a lot of ways, a lot of what we've been talking about in this conversation is kind of what you're doing in each issue there. Has engaging in that, has like being a fan again, has studying these people, has that changed how you think about your job, your role, Ghostly's role, what it means to be a label, all the stuff we're talking about? It seems like the newsletter and the label are very much in conversation doing something similar but from two different points of views. How do you see those overlap? Do you see them influencing each other at all?
I think so. I think so the logic, someone was like, I did a Miami based one the other week that a DJ producer named Jubilee made, and they were like, I didn't quite expect that genre, but it's like, actually that's a big part of my musical education is like regional electronic music, and so it's like a chance to like show different sides of the equation.
Mm,
I think, yeah, appreciating how hard it is to be an artist of any stripe. It renews my love of art and
yeah.
the art practice. It gives me an art practice selfishly. It gives me
Mm-hmm.
writing is not like my first. And I mean, it's almost like like running on the weekend. I joke it's like my Strava miles.
Yeah.
It's like I get creativity out of it. I get a sense of achievement out of it. I get to work with my friend Mike. I get to discover new music or old music. It hits a lot of my like. It's like, and it's a social thing. It's a conversation with the reader, the listener, and
Mm-hmm.
the curator. And so, yeah, you're like I think more and more like of us as a label as like a docent
Mm.
of the ideas and like dignity of the artists we work with. And it's becoming more real with time. We continue to lose the artists just to age and
Yeah.
whatnot
Yeah.
in the culture. So yeah, it's a pretty sacred thing, and this is a way to like touch that in a light, low stakes fashion, I think.
I think that's exactly right. And I think if anything comes across in your work, in the book, hopefully in this conversation, it's that's what you've been doing all along is elevating the artist, whether that's the musician, the band, or the visual artist and the designer, and creating platforms for them and dialogue and space across all sorts of platforms. I have been a fan and a listener and a follower for a long, long time. Not quite all of those 25 years, but a lot of them. And so it was really nice to have this conversation with you. Sam, thanks for being on the show. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
That was my conversation with Sam Valenti. His new book is called We'll Never Stop Living This Way, a Ghostly International Catalog. Our theme music is by Jeremiah Ju. The show is funded thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. If you like what we are doing, I hope you consider supporting us and get some bonus content each month. You can follow us across social media at Surface Podcast, and you can listen to all of our previous episodes wherever you get your podcasts and at our website, scratchingthesurface.fm. Thanks for listening.